everyone. Today I wanted to talk about if you are thinking about learning how to read tarot cards, or if you're thinking about which tarot deck to choose. I wanted to sort of make this video for you if you are an absolute beginner or if you have an interest in tarot. So yes, which tarot deck should you start with? Is it going to be Marseille? Is it going to be Waite Smith, or is it going to be something completely different? So when beginning tarot, one of the first decisions to make is to make this choice. Very quickly, two systems tend to stand out above all others, right? So the Tarot de Marseille, or Tarot of Marseille, and then the Rider-Waite Smith deck, often abbreviated as RWS in writing. So many modern readers recommend starting with this Rider-Waite Smith deck, and while that advice is understandable, it is surely not the valid approach, the only valid approach. And a more useful way to make this decision, I believe, is to understand how each system works and what kind of reading style it encourages. Also, what kind of learning experience it offers. In other words, what kind of learner are you, right? So, Rider-Waite Smith, first published, I believe, in 1909. Don't quote me on that. I might be wrong, but definitely at the beginning of the 19th century, obviously. This deck has had a major influence on modern tarot practice. And most contemporary guidebooks, courses, and interpretations are based on this deck, or the systems that obviously that derived from it, right? So one of the defining features of this deck is that every card, including the minor arcana, almost every card in minor arcana, not all of them, like for example Three of Swords and Eight of Wands comes to mind. They don't include humans in them. So anyways, almost every card, including the minor arcana, is illustrated with a scene, right? It describes a scene. And these scenes, for example, depict people, actions, emotional situations. And this makes, in my opinion, the cards feel more accessible and easier to interpret at first glance. Or does it? I will talk about that also, either, somewhere in this video or maybe in a different video. But let me try to show you a little bit here, right? So this is the major arcana, obviously, and I'm sure most of you guys are already familiar with most of these cards. And when we look at the minor arcana, for example, you see this with the Two of Swords, somebody with a blindfold and holding two swords, and this, the sea behind, and obviously, very gray and blue color kind of, and okay, yeah, the card that I was talking about, the Three of Swords, right? There are no humans, but of course you see these three swords kind of going through a heart. But anyways, now, the illustrated nature of Rider-Waite Smith obviously is one of its biggest advantages. Actually, also in parentheses, maybe the biggest disadvantage, I should say. A beginner can look at a card and immediately begin describing what's happening there, right? So a figure might be walking away, holding something tightly, or defending themselves, like for example the Five of Wands, for example, this conflict kind of scene. And almost like a fight scene here with the Seven of Wands. And I'm sorry that the light is horrible, that sometimes the cards are a bit shiny. But now Yes. So there is action, right? There you can read people's emotions on their faces and so on and so forth. So this visual cue, these visual cues, they provide a clear starting point for interpretation, and even without prior study. Let's put it that way, right? Even without prior study. Let me see if I can actually turn this light off. Ah, much better. Thank you. Okay, I think it's much better. I'm not really kind of the tech pro person, and so you can tell from my YouTube channel that I'm not really kind of this shiny production kind of person. So basically, I just go. I learn as I go, let's put it that way. But where was I? Yes, so the apparent simplicity of this deck should not be confused, obviously, with conceptual simplicity, right? Because the deck was developed with an esoteric context. Arthur Waite, who collaborated with Pamela Coleman Smith, was associated with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And I do have a Golden Dawn deck somewhere, and which also Aleister Crowley's taught deck also comes from the similar school. And there's also a separate Hermetic tarot deck. So all of these actually come from this same school of the Order of the Golden Dawn. So basically, when this deck and the following other decks come to creation, then we see more occult, esotericism, numerology, astrology, all of these things. Well, no, let's exclude numerology, because numerology actually exists before that, because we actually are going to talk about the kind of relationship between Marseille and numerology. But anyway, astrology and all of these things entered also in the world of tarot, right? So we do not talk about any of these things when we look at Marseille deck or any other deck that was created based on the kind of design of the Marseille decks, because they were more actually focused on, for example, the Renaissance aspect of it, or the religious aspect of things, and so on and so forth, because most of these decks were created during the Renaissance times. And but this one obviously kind of goes into a little bit of a different direction. So anyways, yes, Hermetic philosophy, Kabbalistic ideas, and symbolic systems that many readers later connect with astrology and occult traditions, right, enter into play. So now, is it necessary to study these systems in order to read the cards? No. But if you want to deepen your knowledge, and if you want to kind of look at things from different perspectives and understand things, for example, in a much deeper way, it doesn't hurt to be knowledgeable about those things, right? And so I will give an example in a little bit with certain cards. So, but yes, I mean, it is not necessary to know any of these things. I mean, you don't have to, have a knowledge about Christianity or occultism or Kabbalah or astrology or anything like that, right? So do not let this discourage you. But in my personal practice, obviously, I do like exploring these areas because, as I said, I kind of find that, for example, for certain questions or in different situations, sometimes different historical or artistic or whatever aspect of the card, for example, might just pop in my head and intuitively might give me a message, right? So, but anyways, these kind of things actually create an important distinction between the interpretations. So now, Rider-Waite-Smith can be read at a purely visual and intuitive level, focusing on the imagery alone, for sure. But at the same time, it can also be studied as a symbolic system with deeper philosophical layers. Some readers are interested in those layers, and while others prefer to ignore them, both approaches are valid, like I said. But it can be useful to understand that the deck contains obviously more than what appears on the surface, or more than meets the eye, right? So in contrast, the Marseille Tarot, or Tarot de Marseille, operates in a different way. Okay, so the Marseille system, in fact, actually, you will see that it does not even start with the full card. Your full card usually is either like at the end of the major arcana, comes, for example, after the world card, or it will be right before the world card. So let me just move this out of my way. So basically, the order that we know, maybe I should zoom out a bit. Okay, so the order that we know, here's the world card. So sometimes when you open the deck, for example, you might see the full card like right before the world, or sometimes right after. So because it does not even have a number like a 0 or anything, there's nothing on it, right? So basically it starts with the magician card. So and yes, so in contrast, the Tarot de Marseille, like I said, operates in a different way. So the Marseille system has older roots, obviously, and was historically used as a playing card pattern in parts of Europe. Now, while later occult traditions adopted and interpreted Marseille decks, the original structure of the deck is not really, like I said, inherently built around the same esoteric frameworks, or like commonly associated with this one, okay, the Rider-Waite-Smith. The most noticeable difference appears in the minor arcana, right? You will minor arcana in Marseille, the pip cards, the numbered cards, basically in each suit, do not usually contain illustrated scenes. So what they do is that they display arrangements of suit symbols like cups, like wands, like swords, pentacles, etc., right? As you can see here. So at first glance, obviously, this can seem a little bit intimidating or less informative, especially to someone who kind of is accustomed to visual storytelling, right? Visual learning, basically. And when we see it like that, right? For example. So let's open here to compare the Six of Swords between, okay, so here we go. So this is the Rider-Waite-Smith Six of Swords, and this is, for example, the Marseille. So in the Marseille deck, obviously there is just nothing happening here, right? But then here you see like 3 people on a boat with the swords here, and they're just kind of moving along the water, basically just going from point A to point B. And so that's kind of what's going on here. Okay, and so this is the most noticeable difference, basically. So however, though, this difference reflects a shift in reading style rather than a lack of content, I should say, because I will get to that. So I don't want to just go ahead of myself. Like Marseille relies more directly on the interaction between numbers and the suits, right? So instead of, for example, interpreting a scene, the reader might interpret the structure. So this approach emphasizes numerology and pattern recognition and also visual balance. So let's look at maybe some other cards here. So, for instance, we did talk about the Three of Swords, right? So let's just open that up. Three of Swords, as opposed to this one right here. There you go. So, for example, the Three of Swords. You see three swords going through a heart. But here, the situation is completely different. So, which one leaves more room to interpretation, right? So there's also that kind of aspect of things to think about. So, now, as I said, numerology plays a central role in understanding both systems, and not just both, actually, all kinds of tarot systems. It is really important. But it is especially important in Marseille because in modern Western numerology, the numbers, let's say 1 through 9, are considered the foundational building blocks. Like 10, for example, representing both completion and a return to the beginning, 1 plus 0, right? So it kind of creates 1. And so both the ending and the beginning. And each number describes a stage in a process rather than a fixed keyword, if you will. Like, for example, 1 represents beginnings, initiation, individuality, right? The beginning of a cycle. And like 2, for example, is duality, choices, decisions, pros and cons. The 3s represent growth, expansion, expression. So like, or lack thereof, depending on what the story is, right? So basically the positive and the negative traits obviously are kind of, intertwined in this situation. They all live within one another, right? So that's why the cards tell us the story, if actually the negative traits or the positive traits of the cards or the numbers are going to be more dominating. So you don't have to learn the reversals, or you don't have to be doing the reversals either. Like personally, I do not do, because when I have all the cards in front of me, it tells me, it gives me the message if we're talking about something negative or positive here. So this being said, where was I? Yes, 3 represents growth, expansion, expression, or lack thereof, right? And the 4 is structure, stability, or maybe comfort zone. And 5s are about changes, movements, disruption, sometimes conflicts. And 6s, for instance, are adjustments, transitions. And in fact, we did have, for example, with the 6 of Swords here, right? So it kind of represents a transition, right? So from, like, you see waves here, you see the water is kind of more flat, right? So from troubled waters towards something more serene and peaceful. And so 7s are about perspective, analysis, observation, reflection. And while I am at 7s, let's go to the 7 of Pentacles. So here's the thing. Sometimes I do get a lot of questions Like, why did you read this Seven of Pentacles in such a negative way? So let's see. And now let's look at the Seven of Pentacles in this deck right here. There it is. Okay. So let's see what we're dealing with. By the way, for those who are interested, because there are a lot of different Marseille decks, I am using Jodorowsky's Marseille deck. Okay, so now, Seven of Pentacles. So here's the thing. The reason why it is important actually to learn the whole philosophy and or the, you know, methods of each card behind, you know, the creation, you are not only, you're not limiting yourself to the keywords. Like, you go to a website, right? So you look at the keywords for Seven of Pentacles. Patience, patience, patience. And, but then you have a deck like the Hermetic Tarot deck. And let me get that actually. All right, so, you know, since this deck actually comes from this Hermetic deck as well, I don't know if you can see this, but the name of Seven of Pentacles, every card has a name in the Hermetic deck. And the name of Seven of Pentacles is Lord of Success Unfulfilled. So how do they work for you, those keywords? Because when you look at the face of this person, you kind of don't see someone happy, right? And in fact, in earlier versions of the design of this card, you kind of see the facial expression. This one maybe can be a little bit more neutral, but in the earlier designs of this, earlier copies of this card, actually you could see like lips a little bit more tilted downwards. This, you know, the expression of frustration, unhappiness was much more apparent. And here we have like the Six Pentacles, and then between his feet we have just one, and the Lord of Success Unfulfilled. How would that fit into this situation, right? Meaning that you put all your eggs in one basket and you did not get the outcome that you desired. That's one way to look at it. Or if it's like a more future position type of card, well, it is time for you to kind of sit down and reflect on things, just so you don't find yourself in this situation. What can you do to make things better so you can get something like a better outcome? Number 7 is always about reflection. And when we look at the Jodorowsky's deck, which is obviously the design, like I said, is very similar to the Hermetic deck here, right? But again, obviously the interpretation is completely different, because technically Marseille comes before the Hermetic deck. So whatever occult meanings that were given to these cards basically come with the Order of Golden Dawn. So, and in fact, I do have from Jodorowsky's book, I'm going to read the passage related to the Seven of Pentacles. Okay, so in the center of Seven of Pentacles, we see 3 circles arranged in a triangle pointed toward the top. Okay, so you're not looking at a triangle like this, but you're looking at this triangle right here in the center, and it pointed upwards, right? So what does he say? These forms symbolize the mind, the spirit. In gestation, in the center of matter, which is the square, okay? We can conclude from this that extreme action in the physical world is the gestation of the mind and internal ideal. Okay, so before actions, there's always the spiritual, internal, or, you know, intuitive process, right? So this triangle will eventually invade the entire square, exactly as Christ entered into gestation inside the womb of a human being, Mary, so she could give birth to him and be converted into a sacred being. We could also say that what we are witnessing at work in the Seven of Pentacles is the action of consciousness upon the heart of the cell. You see how these are completely different meanings depending on which system you are reading, right? So I literally rarely look at this card in the Rider-Waite-Smith as patience, 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 to be honest with you, knowing all of these things and how, knowing the history of the card, knowing the philosophy that inspired it, right? And so basically when I look at this card, and that is my personal opinion, some other reader might read it as patience, right? But when I look at my readings, what I usually see here is that, hey, this is a time for you to stop and reflect and see where things are heading, where things are going. Do you need to make changes? Or do you need to walk away completely? Are you enduring something that you're not supposed to be enduring because you think that patience actually is something powerful or good, because there are societal norms that go with it, right? So you don't want you don't want to see yourself as the person who gives up and walks away. You want to see yourself as the person who endures. But is it a good thing? Are you actually doing a good thing for yourself, or are you wasting your time? So, I mean, all of these things that we have to look at, obviously. So, anyways, eights are about, strength, organization, and effective movement, direction, clarity, and structure, right? So the other thing that is different in these two decks, so let me just put these things away. I'm making a mess, but bear with me. Like I said, I'm not a professional video kind of person, right? So I just do things as I go. I'm sorry. Maybe this isn't like the right way to do things, but hey. Okay, so strength, and then we have the justice, right? So you will see also some decks, they are switching the strength and the justice cards, the position. So there you go. In the Rider-Waite-Smith, you see this as number 8, and justice will be number 11. So that also obviously changes the interpretation a little bit here, right? And so going forward with the numerology, we have number 9, obviously associated with completion or almost completion, mastery, intensity, maturity, abundance, or isolation, not really asking for help, trying to do things alone, or just being too analytical, overly analyzing, and not being able to take action. Like I said, the positives and negatives will always be intertwined, and depending on the position of the other cards or combination of the other cards and the question obviously that was asked to you, these things basically are going to start shaping in different directions, right? And so on and so forth with the numerology. So when this framework is applied to tarot, especially Marseille, obviously the cards become much easier to interpret, okay? Much easier to interpret. So let's pull some minor arcana cards here with the Marseille deck, okay? Right? So now that you know that, for example, 4 is structure, stability, foundation, right? And so when you know this, maybe when you look at a card that comes with it, before it, after it, you might actually, for example, interpret this in a completely different way, right? So look at these three cards, for example, right? So think of it as a past, present, future kind of thing, right? 10 of Cups, 4 of Wands, and Page of Cups. If you think about this, for example, let's see, where is my relationship going? Okay. Now, when you look at the 10 of Cups, let's say that in a past position, right? So there is emotional overflow, emotional excitement, fulfillment, heart was full, and maybe there was a lot of idealization, happiness, so on and so forth, family. And then when you look at the present energies with the 4 of Wands, what you see here is more like a grounded energy, right? So it's the structure that comes after the high, the adrenaline kind of starts leveling up in a relationship. It doesn't mean the joy is lost, obviously, but it just means that it is more grounded, okay? Now, remember, the 4 can also be the comfort zone. So let's say that in a long-term relationship, you might say that maybe we're losing the flame a little bit, right? Maybe things are just too structured and too kind of predictable. I mean, it feels safe. It feels good. I'm still happy in my relationship, but something is missing. I just I want this. And so the Page of Cups tells you, well, then you got to do something about it, right? So tarot does not really predict the future. What it tells you is that, well, what can you do, right? What should you do to reignite that flame, right? And so basically, maybe just spending some time for more intimate connection. Like if there are kids involved, also maybe just some getaway is needed, and maybe some kind of just spoiling each other a little bit, pampering each other a little bit, doing things to ignite that flame. Maybe in the order and the structure sorry, of the daily life, maybe some things were lost, or not lost, but kind of were put on the back burner. And so if you can find a way to bring a little bit more excitement to your relationship, you can for sure reignite that flame, right? So knowing the numerology connection to the cards can actually make a great deal of difference in your reading style, right? So now, this being said, going back to where we were before, so Marseille basically is not really lacking in meaning. Instead, it presents actually meaning in a more abstract and more kind of, I want to say, straightforward way, okay? But, you're not guided by a predefined scene, but this is like you're guided instead to actively interpret the interaction between the numbers, between the suits, and so on and so forth. So in Rider-Waite Smith, the reading process often begins with the image itself, right? So, for example, let's just have some cards in front of us, right? So, I mean, in the Rider-Waite Smith, the reading, yes, begins with with a scene, with or series of scenes, and as a reader, you kind of describe what is happening, and you're building meaning from that narrative, right? In Marseille, the process often begins with structure, and so the reader considers what the number represents, what the suit represents, and how they combine, right? So observation is more important in both systems. Is equally important in both systems. And in Rider-Waite Smith, this involves analyzing details within the scene, and the direction a figure is facing can suggest orientation toward past or future. For example, left usually means past, and right usually means the future, for example, right? So, and in both decks, actually, this is for both decks, for every single deck, past, past or future, the positions, obviously, they make a difference. Facial expressions, the feet, the hands, the position of the hands, and how, like, is somebody sitting down? Is somebody standing up? Or is somebody, like, standing still, or is in motion? So each system has its strengths. Rider-Waite Smith offers immediate visual guidance and is supported, obviously, by a large body of teaching material. It's especially useful for readers who prefer storytelling and image-based interpretation. Marseille, on the other hand, offers a more direct and structured approach, as I said before, encouraging the development of numerological understanding and independent interpretation. So it's particularly suited to readers who prefer working with patterns, abstraction, structure, etc. So the choice between the two is not about which deck is better or worse, or which deck is easier or more difficult, right? Or which one is more accessible or less accessible. It just means, like, what kind of learner are you? And how do you prefer learning things, or how do you prefer doing your readings? What is your approach? What is your intuition telling you? What is your heart telling you? Which one do you feel more drawn to? So, personally, in my readings, I rarely use Rider-Waite Smith deck. I did learn tarot with Rider-Waite Smith deck, and but the more I researched about it, and the more I started digging into the history, art, symbology, icons, and colors, and all of these things, what once felt like a very simple deck to me, the Marseille deck, opened up like peeling the layers of an onion. It kind of contains way more than it shows at first glance. And so I found myself throughout the years more drawn to decks that are based on the Marseille school, if you will. So that is just my personal preference. Ultimately, I want to say that both systems are equally valid, right? So they're both very popular, widely used all over the world. And they're capable of producing really accurate, meaningful, joyful, intense readings. And the decision does not really need to be permanent either. You can switch from one to another, which I do still. And I have actually around 200 decks. Sometimes I can just go with something completely, different. And sometimes minimalist, sometimes very descriptive, sometimes whatever the mood is, right, for the day, basically. So, but many readers begin with one system and then later explore the other ones and gaining a broader understanding of tarot as a whole as they go, which is, I think, you shouldn't really be limiting yourself in one direction or another either, because exploring and learning more, discovering more is always a good thing. And then you can just make your own decision, you know, as you go. And like I said, you don't have to stick with one or the other. You can switch between the two and so on and so forth. So the most effective approach is to choose the deck that feels more natural to work with at the beginning. Whatever that means, starting, you know, with the visual guidance, yeah, I mean, whatever it means to you, basically. So either you start with the visual guidance of Rider-Waite-Smith, or the simplicity, well, quote unquote simplicity, as I said, like an onion, it peels itself, basically, of Marseille. The goal is the same, to develop a clear and consistent way of understanding the cards, after all, right? So tarot is not limited to one system, and there's no single correct path, or there is no wrong path. Well, here's the thing. There is one wrong path. And I'm not gonna apologize for it either. Learn, if you think you can learn tarot in 1 hour just by, you know, sticking to the keywords, you are doing disservice to tarot. For that I will not apologize, because this is, you know, I mean, it's not as quick and simple. For sure it's not. It should not be. And if you stick to the keywords, you might think that every time you see the Three of Swords in a love reading, you might kind of find yourself saying, oh my God, there is a third party. Or every time you see a Seven of Swords and Five of Swords, you might say, oh my God, your partner is cheating on you. Now, I call this BS. For certain situations, it might be valid or accurate, but in most situations, it's much deeper than that. Swords represents our mind, our intuition, our logic, our reason, and why the Three Swords are going into the heart. It means that you are struggling to maybe accept a harsh truth, or maybe you're struggling to express your emotions because you are hurt, or you don't want to hurt someone, or there was past hurt and you're not able to heal yourself from it. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's just, there are just so many things. And if you just see the Seven of Pentacles and say, you got to be patient in this relationship, when in fact, you might be giving the complete wrong message, saying maybe you are really wasting your time in this relationship because you're not exploring all the options, or you're not looking at your relationship from a healthier perspective, right? So please, the only thing that I can tell any beginner, forget the keywords. That would be the wrongest way to start tarot. The keywords. Absolutely. There is no quick learning. And all the, you know, promises about learn to read 78 cards in 1 hour, I'm sorry, but that's just BS to me. And I'm not going to apologize for thinking this way. So that's what I have for today. And I know it was this video turned out to be much longer than I actually imagined. I'm so sorry. So if you'd like a personal reading with me, my website is sashanoyantarot.com. You can find the link in the description down below. Thank you for sticking around. Talk to you soon. Bye.